How's your mental health? We have all fallen short of our own expectations or the expectations of others. This internal struggle is something that unites us all as human beings. Yet why do we feel the need to pretend? My next guest, Sheila Stauffer, is a mental health advocate and the executive director for Cornerstone Counselling. She's here today to help break the chain of stigma and negative thought patterns that hold us back. Welcome to this segment of Contagious Courage with VN King. Sheila, I am so excited that I get to have you here today in studio and talk about a very important topic of mental health. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me today, Van.
Absolutely. Before we get into talking a little bit more about resources or, the stigma that's attached to mental health, could you tell us why are you such an advocate for mental health?
Okay, so I think that's a really interesting question, and it's really a big question because I've always been interested in people, and I've always been really empathetic. And my start in my work life was as a social worker. I worked in foster care for 12 years, so I was working with children and families. And I really loved that work. That was great work, but I also saw a lot of pain and a lot of families being torn apart, and that's super hard. And so as I looked at that, I thought, wow, what a shame that these people weren't helped earlier in their life, because a lot of families break down because of maybe historical trauma, mental health issues, or addictions. And that pain of not getting treatment early enough just sort of ripples throughout a family and can tear it apart. And then when I moved to Cornerstone after 12 years, I thought, what a great opportunity to start to work with people maybe before the family breaks down and before the suffering takes place. And maybe we can get ahead of that and help. I just felt like I found my calling.
People are being more brave. They're speaking out more and trying to remove some of that stigma. But what area or people group does that stigma seem to really be strong in?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question, because when I first came to Cornerstone, one of the things I noticed right away as I began to look at demographics was that about 65% of our clients are female and the rest are male. And if you look at couples and booking appointments, almost all couple appointments are booked by women. So I noticed that men are not represented as much in counseling. They don't come as often. And that's curious because I also know that about 3 men die by suicide for every 1 woman. So their rate is much higher. And that's a statistic actually across Canada. And what I also found was that men react different to mental health issues. So women, maybe talk about it with friends, they maybe get depressed and they isolate as well, but men will engage in some different behaviors more often. So they're more likely to get into addictions, they're more likely to withdraw, to become irritable, or to engage in risk-taking behaviors. So those are really dangerous things. So sometimes a woman will go for help, whereas a man will withdraw, and then people will look at these behaviors and they'll withdraw more. So they are at a much higher risk for things like suicide or succumbing to really difficult issues such as addictions.
Wow. And talk about this COVID season. Like, what are your numbers like?
I haven't checked on the male-female numbers during COVID. I do know that anytime you have job loss, a job is a big part of a man's identity, right? Men really think they are what they do. And so I'm sure it is very difficult. I know a few years ago when we had the last drop in the economy, I think it was around 2015, we saw a big jump in male suicides. And as a matter of fact, that was one of the things that really got me motivated to talk more about men's mental health, was when I looked at those numbers and I thought, oh man, we need to care about the men in our life, because we all have men in our life that we love and are precious. We have fathers, we have sons, we have partners. So we need to talk about this, and we need to be aware that just because they're the fixers and the tough guys doesn't mean they're not vulnerable, and doesn't mean that they don't need our support.
They definitely do need our support. And people think counseling, or I'm going to see a psychiatrist or a counselor, is a very scary thing. There's this big mystery around like going to see a counselor. Like, could you tell us something that will take away the mystery of what happens. I come to your center today. What can I experience from the time I enter the door that can help someone out there even maybe take that first step?
Okay, well, that's a great question, because there are a lot of misconceptions, and people are often really scared about that first appointment. So actually, before the appointment, people usually phone or email, and they'll talk to an intake worker, and our intake workers are trained to help people right off as soon as they make that first phone call. So they'll talk a little bit, get some basic information, and they will ask, what issue are you coming for? And they're just looking for a really brief description so that they can properly match you to a counselor. We have a lot of counselors, some of them have specializations, so we want to make sure the fit is good, because fit's important.
Yeah.
And so then when you come, it's going to be very much like going to a physiotherapist or going to a chiropractor. You're going to walk in, it's a nice, comfortable waiting room, you're going to check in with reception, and then you're going to get a little bit of a form to fill out, and then you just wait for your counselor. Right. Your counselor comes out, introduces himself, and takes you back. And once you're in the counseling room, you're in the driver's seat. So they're not going to do anything you don't want to do. You're not going to have to talk about issues you're not ready to talk about. The first session likely is going to be kind of an introduction and talking about what your goals are, and really setting up the treatment plan for the next few visits so you can get to exactly where you want to go.
I love that it is your heart and passion to help people before there's a crisis. I mean, there's one thing to be strong and keep going, but how do I know I need help? How does someone really know when they're being proactive or when they'll be like, because it's like, oh, I'll be fine. Could you speak into that?
That is a very good question. Could I speak into that? How do you know? I think you have to know yourself, and this is something I often tell people too. You don't have to wait till you're at rock bottom. As a matter of fact, my preference would be don't wait till you're at rock bottom, because that's a hard place to be. But when you find you're doing things that, or you're not doing things that you normally would have enjoyed, so maybe don't have the energy to go out and go for that walk. Maybe you don't feel like going out with friends, and you normally like to go out with friends. So when you notice that you're not enjoying activities that you previously enjoyed, that's a big sign. When you find yourself maybe crying or sleeping a lot, or maybe not sleeping, maybe you can't sleep. The same with eating. You're either eating too much of the bad stuff and you can't stop, or you're not eating at all. So, it's subtle, and sometimes it's really hard to recognize in yourself. We've all heard that old analogy of a frog in the water. If you drop a frog in hot water, which don't do, that's cruel.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but if you drop a frog in hot water, they'll jump out. If you put them in hot water and you turn it up slowly, they'll die. And I don't know if that's true, but that's the story. But it's that's a good analogy. Yes. Sometimes if the temperature raises slowly, you don't notice as much.
That's right, yeah.
And so that can be a real concern. So that's when sometimes, too, you've got to listen to others.
Yes.
If people who really care about you are saying, I just noticed this, and how are you doing? And you see that happening a few times, maybe it's time to do a check-in with yourself. Yeah. It takes courage to step out. Anytime you're doing something new or out of your comfort zone, it takes courage, and you are really putting yourself out there. You're making yourself very vulnerable, especially if you've never been to counseling. You have no idea what to expect.
Right.
So I really honor and respect people who do come through the door, making that first phone call or coming to the first session. A lot of people are terrified.
Yeah.
And what they will often say after a session, they'll say, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought. It's okay. And they'll tell their therapist that, and their therapist goes, whew, well, thank goodness.
Right.
But, it does take a tremendous amount of courage and strength to be able to admit that, I might need some help, and to be able to put yourself in a position where you have to talk about you. We don't like to talk about ourselves. We like to talk about, especially people like you like to be really strong. Me, I like to be the helper. I'm the helper. And so for people who are used to being in other roles, to have to say, ooh, I'm the one that needs help, that can be tough. Yeah. That can be a real growing experience. Yes. But I think we can't, as a helper myself, I know I can't really help other people unless I'm willing to be helped.
That's really good. You're taking away some of that, I think, intimidation about maybe making that first call. Mm-hmm. But there's still a judgment about maybe needing to be better before I can go to therapy. It's like getting that cleaning lady to come, right? But you got to tidy up first. Like, what would you say to somebody who's fearful?
We get a lot of people who are fearful and are afraid to say what's really on their heart. They're afraid of judgment, and they're afraid somebody's going to, kind of wince and like, ugh, or they're afraid of condemnation. Oh, you did that wrong, or why aren't you doing it this way? But that isn't what therapy is about. And you don't have to make your therapist feel more comfortable. Your therapist is there to listen to you and to make you feel more comfortable. So that's what therapy is about. It's about holding your client in high regard because they deserve it. They're a person on this earth and they deserve regard and they deserve mental health. And therapists know that. So you're probably not going to shock or surprise, or even if it is something they've never heard, they can hold that space. And that's the wonderful thing about therapy is your therapist is there to help you grow and help you on your way.
So good. I love that. Walking with a journey. I also maybe wanted to ask you about friends, parents, coworkers, somebody that we have in our corner that is struggling. Like, how can I be a better support for somebody that is struggling with mental health? Maybe as a little tip for the viewers to say, I don't struggle with mental health personally, but like, please help me know how to help my friend, my dad, my sister, my whatever.
Well, we get that a lot. A lot of people say, how can I be a support to somebody? And the first thing is be there. Be there, make that phone call, go for a walk. What's going to, I like to talk about do the thing that makes your heart sing. So if you have a friend and you know that they really love to go for walks in the river valley, say that. Let's go for a walk in the river valley. If you know they like to go to the gym, but they're just not really into it, say, hey, you want to go out tonight? Maybe we'll go to the gym. And so helping them do those things that they enjoy. Another thing that you can do might be to draw other people in. If you have somebody who's really suffering and you want to be careful, you have to be respectful of what other people want. Like maybe they don't want other people to know, but say, hey, what about if we told our other friend about how you've been saying you're struggling, and what if we put our heads together and we try to come up with a plan? So bringing some people together. And then, of course, there might be times where you really need outside help. And you want to be careful. And you want to really listen to what your friend might be saying to you. If they're saying things that you're thinking, oh, this sounds a little bit like, a suicidal a thought that they're having, ask them. And that's the hardest thing. People find that so hard. Ask them. You want me to ask them that? Yes, ask them. Are you feeling suicidal? Are you thinking of killing yourself? They'll tell you. They'll probably tell you, and they might even be relieved. So it's a lot to put
removing
on a
that
person.
stigma.
Removing that stigma. Exactly. They might even be relieved and they think, oh, she already knows, or he already knows. And so then you know what you're dealing with. Or they might say, gosh, no, that's not the case at all, which can be relieving. But don't be afraid to ask the question because you might get an answer that will lead to more healing.
Right. As we're talking, and what I'm hearing most is no matter what the solution, no matter what the strategy is, all I'm hearing is that just create safe places for people. Just create safe places for people. And I think that is being okay to sit in someone's dysfunction, I guess. Being okay to hear what you maybe don't want to hear and create that safe place. Because why is it, I guess, that people would feel fearful? Because they're afraid of maybe how they're being responded to, right? That internal struggle that we talked about.
Like that, the safe spaces, because I think that is so true. You are counseling is creating a safe space and being able to sit in that moment. With a friend, it can be tough, but being able to sit in that moment and listen to them and calm yourself, because sometimes we want to fix it. We want to fix it. But sometimes we just have to be able to sit in that space and listen and just hold the moment without that fight or flight kicking in. That can be kind of tough.
Wow, Sheila, I've just been really encouraged and inspired by just knowing that when we start talking more, people will start hopefully stepping up and being able to step out and finding the courage to get help. Who can benefit? I know we talked a little bit more, but like let's do some naming. Like who can really benefit from seeing a therapist?
Well, I think really anybody can benefit, but I would describe sort of 3 levels of clients that we typically have. So the first level is somebody who's maybe functioning really well and they're doing okay, but they've got a few things in their life that they notice, hey, that's kind of a niggly for me and that's holding me back. And maybe I want to go to the next level. So those people come in, they have something very specific in mind that they want to work on, and they work on it, and they're very happy. So they are doing good, but they want to reach a higher level. The next type of client that comes in is maybe somebody who is doing just fine, and then they had a traumatic event in their life. Something happened and things changed. So it could have been a job loss, could have been, the loss of a family member, could have been a trauma. Maybe they were in an accident, maybe they were assaulted. So something changed and they really need help to get through that rough patch and to process that trauma. So that's another type of client that comes. A third type of person that comes is somebody who maybe has never felt like they were okay. They've never had good self-worth. They've maybe had a very traumatic childhood, or they were abused or neglected as a child, or maybe they just haven't ever felt well, and they've never felt that they've never done well. So those people also are another group that come, and what we're hoping for them is that they'll get to another level, that they'll feel better. They won't forget about their traumas, they won't forget about their childhood neglect or whatever caused that, but they'll be able to realize that they're valuable. I really value all three groups, but particularly the last one I talked about, because those people are the people who are saying, I think it could be better. They have the spark of hope that if I try and if I get some help, maybe, just maybe, my life could be a little bit better. And I admire them so much because they are looking to change their story forever.
Yes.
And that's wonderful.
It is. And it is possible to rewrite your story. Oftentimes when it comes to coaching or self-help or anything like that, it's they can't afford the help that they need, or, that kind of thing. What has Cornerstone Counselling done to help even maybe help with that struggle?
Well, at Cornerstone, we want to make sure that everybody gets the help they need. And as you know, Alberta Health Services does not cover most counseling services. So money can be a big barrier for some people. So we have set our fees according to the client's household income. I often think, imagine if you had a beautiful teenage daughter who was 13 and she was just the joy of your life. But maybe she started to get bullied at school, and so you saw that lovely young girl become more and more withdrawn and become sad and anxious. And you as a single mother couldn't afford to get her help. You had to make a choice. Do I get groceries this week, or do I take my child to counseling? Nobody wants to make that kind of choice, and nobody should have to make that kind of choice. So that's why we make sure we have services that can accommodate anybody.
Wow, that is so great. Sheila, any final thoughts that you want to speak to someone today who's struggling, that's maybe sitting there, like they're just maybe looking at the screen right now and being like, oh, I wish I had the confidence to be able to step out. I want you to speak into that person's heart today and tell them that no matter where they are watching in the world, that they could reach out for support, but if you're in the Edmonton area, that they would reach out to Cornerstone Counselling.
So I guess what I would say is it is tough to be vulnerable. It's tough to step out. I understand that. It takes tremendous courage. But think about what might be. Think about how your life would be if you could get past that thing that's holding you back. If you could process that trauma, if you could work through those feelings or those behaviors that you know are not serving you, that they're not doing well for you. Think about that, and I hope that you can have the belief in yourself and the courage to pick up the phone. And you can call us at Cornerstone at 780-482-6215. And interestingly, we now do video counseling, so if you're anywhere in the province of Alberta, we can probably help you. And don't be afraid. I know it's hard, but don't be afraid. There is a better way to end your story.
Beautifully said, Sheila. Thank you so much for all this insight that you've given us. And I know, I have a gut feeling that there are people watching that have felt empowered, and that I hope that they do step out and have the courage to ask for help, so that, you know what, between us all, like me, be in a safe place, you be in a safe place, all doing our part to take away this stigma and have the courage to do that. And so Sheila's information will be in the description of this video. All the contact information of how to reach out to Cornerstone Counselling will be there. And also, you will see Sheila again with me on Night of Courage. Yay. I am so excited. And so that's another plug for Night of Courage, which there will also be a link in the description for your Night of Courage. Join us, because that is why I want you to join us, because courage is not about having it together all the time. It's about, yeah, I'm afraid, I need help, but I'm going to keep going. And that is true courage.
Yes, it is.
So thank you. All that's left to say is, not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to you and your name goes all the honor and glory for his unfailing love and faithfulness. Until next time, bye for now. And give me a nice smile on the camera there now.